Let's do a test Tuesday. Got to be one in all that. Welcome back to the workshop. Today we're doing a little bit of a different test Tuesday. It's going to be a retest of a one that we did a little while ago. And it's of these little grey Fischer plasterboard wall plugs. And the reason we're doing this test again is, well, a couple of reasons. First of all, we've got the new test rig that now does the proper data logging and all that sort of thing. And I wanted to do a test on two different types of screws. What I'm going to do 3 tests on a 10 gauge 1 3/4 inch QuickSilver screw. And I'm also going to do 3 lots of tests on a TurboGold 4.5mm by 45mm wood screw, just to see what the difference is. They're very, very similar lengthwise, but you can see that the QuickSilver doesn't have the thread going all the way up to the top of the screw, and we weren't sure if that was influencing the results last time. The TurboGold does have the thread going all the way at the top. Other differences, the QuickSilver has a very, very slightly wider thread on it. As I say, it's a 10 gauge screw, but working it out in metric, it's 4.82mm thread size. And the TurboGold is a 4.52mm thread size. So pretty close to the 4.5mm quoted on the packet. I'll make it 4.52mm. I'm not going to do a full commentary of pulling the screws out the plasterboard this time. I think once you've seen a screw being pulled out of an object 1,000 times, that starts to lose its novelty a little bit. So what we're going to do today is concentrate a little bit more on analysing the results and telling you which one did best. So here is the slightly scary set of results. Don't worry, I shall talk you through the graphs. It's not quite as crazy looking as it might first seem. Basically what we've got here, we've got the orangey colours are the QuickSilver screws, and the greeny colours are the TurboGold screws. So what I'll do to make it a bit easier to kind of understand what's going on here, we'll just look at the results of the first QuickSilver test first of all, just so I can show you what's kind of going on. So here's the graph for test number 1. And what you can see here is where the graph kind of goes up steadily and then it drops suddenly and then it starts going back up again. The reason for that, I think, is because these plugs are kind of held in to the wall both by friction of the outer portion of the plug, so there'll be a certain amount of friction of the plug caused from the top end of the plug, if that makes sense. And then once that's pulled out, then it's the bottom little leggy things, the little cleats at the bottom of the plug, that's gripping onto the drywall from the back. So you get another second level of kind of support from the plug at that point. Now, this kind of bit here is more or less meaningless because as soon as the plug has pulled out the wall at all, it's of no use anymore. So as soon as you get to this bit here, then that is the peak load. Any further, like this bit here, doesn't really mean anything because the plug's half hanging out the wall at that point. You want to know at what point the plug starts to fall out the wall, essentially, and it's at this point here. And for that QuickSilver screw, it was 23.49 kilos, which is pretty good going, much better than we had before when we tested it last time and we got to a 14.25 kilo peak. I'll show you the rest of the results before we draw any wild conclusions. So then, if we look at the TurboGold results, very similar in terms of having this first initial peak and then it continuing to climb up quite a lot afterwards. But again, you see this section of the graph here is meaningless because the plug's half hanging out the wall. This is the bit that we're interested in, this first little peak here. Because again, with the TurboGold, it's gripping on to the top end of the plug and then that releases the friction holding that plug into the wall. It just can't handle the load anymore. It releases, but then the little leg cleat things at the back start gripping and they actually get a slightly better grip, but the plug's half hanging out, so that doesn't really help matters. And in this case, with the TurboGold, it only managed 13.11 kilos. So pretty big difference there between the QuickSilver result and the TurboGold result. What I've then done, I've taken an average across all three tests and I'm just going to lay those graphs over the top of each other. So here you can see the orangey colour graph is the average of all of the QuickSilver tests and the greeny colour is the average of all the TurboGold tests. So here is the figure that we're looking at. So this is the QuickSilver, I'll just put QS. And this little peak here is what we're looking at for the TurboGold. Because, as I say, at this point here onwards, from here onwards, the screw is hanging out the wall. It's kind of, it's meaningless because you never ever want that to happen. So everything past that point and past here it's failed at that point. Failed. And I think it is simply because the QuickSilver is a slightly wider screw. There's not a lot in it, only 0.3 of a millimetre, but it is slightly wider and that must be just enough to provide that extra bit of friction on the plug. The other possible reason for the QuickSilver doing better than the TurboGold is that obviously the TurboGold's got the rifled shank on it, and whether or not the rifled shank is just cutting into the plug too much and it's maybe removing quite a lot of the plastic material from the plug, whereas the QuickSilver's not really going to do that. The QuickSilver's just going to apply a fairly constant pressure on the side of the plugs, and that is, you know, a general rule of thumb. I do prefer using a non-rifled screw or a non-self-drilling screw in plugs if possible. Sometimes that's not always an option depending on the size of the head or whatever you've got to hand, you know. TurboGold and self-drilling screws, they're great for going into wood and situations where you need the screw to drill its way into the substrate, but for going into like plastic plugs and stuff like that, I generally think you're going to be better off going for something like a QuickSilver or something that doesn't drill its way into the plug, just a bog standard single or twin thread screw. Here's the peak load results here. QuickSilver 10 gauge 1 3/4 inch. Test 1 was 23.5 kilos. Test 2 was 20.6. Test 3 was 18.4, giving an average of 20.8 kilos. And with the TurboGold 4.5 by 45 mil, 13.1, 10.7 and 11, giving an average of 11.6, almost half of what the QuickSilver managed. So there you go. If you're going to use screws in these sort of plugs, you're probably going to get a better result with a slightly heavier gauge screw. So as I say, we've gone for the 10 gauge and the 1 3/4 inch screw. Oh, and by the way, when we talked last time about the screw pulling itself half out the board due to it not having the thread all the way at the top of the screw, on 2 of the tests I did, that didn't happen at all. And only on, I think it was on the 3rd test, where the screw did pull itself out of the plug slightly. But on the first 2 tests, that didn't happen. It made no difference that the thread didn't run all the way to the top of the screw. As per usual, these tests are just for fun, don't use the results for anything important. The tests are in 12.5mm plasterboard or drywall. We're measuring peak loads here in kilograms with no safety factor, and always follow the manufacturer's recommended loadings. Don't go off the figures on here. Just for a bit of fun, like. There you go, interesting set of results there. Let us know in the comments below what you prefer to use in plasterboard. I know a lot of you like using, I had to buy these from a shop. I don't keep these in stock. The twirly helter-skelter ones. We'll test those next week. Watch this space. By the way, before I forget, a few people asked about the flags. So this, at the minute, I've got the flag set up in, I think it's total number of views on the channel in all time. And obviously the bigger countries are going to get a bigger number on this, and the UK is going to have a higher number because most viewers are from the UK. But we have, the United States has just pipped the UK to the post in terms of overall total number of views. We've then got India. I have no idea loads of people from India would be watching the channel. A massive welcome if you're in India, a big welcome to the channel. We've then got Canada and of course Australia coming in 5th on the total view count. I can only apologise, Australia, for the quality of the print. Blame my rubbish Dell printer. I will mix this up a bit every now and then because it's probably not fair on smaller countries. I'll change it every now and then and I'll let you know on Twitter what version is currently up, but this is currently the version of total views, total worldwide views, top 5. Anyway, wherever you are on this beautiful planet of ours, a very warm welcome to the channel, and thank you for watching. I shall see you next time.